Welcome. How are you? My name is Elena Thompson. I am the Senior Associate Director of Affinity Engagement at Johns Hopkins, and I am thrilled to welcome you here tonight to our Real Entrepreneur Stories, Nightmares, and Inspirations. This is the launch event for one of our newest affinity groups, GeeksRock, with an exclamation point. And I think that you're in for a treat tonight. We have 6 fabulous speakers, and we're thrilled that you could join us tonight. So not only is this the first event for this particular affinity, but we've got another first tonight. Tonight we are live streaming our program, which is the first time we've live streamed an affinity program. So I want to welcome all the individuals who are joining us online tonight. Thank you for being with us. I hope that you enjoy the program. I am really just window dressing. I want to turn over the program really quickly so we can get into the interesting stories, and I want to introduce you tonight to our founder of our GeeksRock Affinity Group and our MC for this evening, Rob Aggarwal, who is an engineering grad 06, also did his postdoc work at medicine, and I have the pleasure of turning over the program to Rob. Rob, thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Elena, for the introduction. I'm Rob Aggarwal. I want to first of all thank the Johns Hopkins Alumni Association for being a cheerleader of this idea and also for working really hard in putting this together. It's a lot of hard work, and I'm greatly appreciative of that. So a big thanks to Elena, Radia, and the Johns Hopkins Alumni Association team for putting this together. Second, I want to thank the speakers. We have a stellar line of speakers who took time from their busy schedules to come today and share with us their interesting stories. And also want to thank the attendees. We greatly appreciate, again, all of you coming today for this event. So let me just very briefly introduce myself. I mean, like Elena mentioned, I'm a Johns Hopkins graduate. From the School of Engineering. I graduated in 2005. I worked in New York City for 4.5 years, and then close to 4 years ago, I started my own firm. And during this process, I went through a number of interesting moments. Some of them were, I would call them nightmares of an entrepreneur, and some of them were victory moments. So that's what was the inspiration for today's event, where we wanted to bring together a line of speakers to share their interesting stories about, again, a mix of stories which you never read in books, when they had nightmares or when they had those victory moments and what they learned from it. Let me just say a couple of words about GeeksRock. I mean, what's the inspiration behind it, what we are trying to achieve, and what's the kind of the long-term plan. Because today is a launch event. We want it to be hopefully a successful series and kind of create a new platform of first of its kind. So the inspiration behind GeeksRock is it comes from events like TED and Ignite, which I'm sure many of you have attended or have spoken at those events, which have done a great job of putting together inspirational talks. What we wanted to do was create a similar platform, but make it less formal, make it a little bit semi-casual, semi-business formal, where people can just talk about their experiences and also give a chance to attendees for the broader group to come and interact with each other. So overall, our goal is quite simple. I mean, we basically want to create this platform for interaction among the alumni community to share their stories, their experiences. And I just want to say that our objective will not be achieved if all of you don't get involved or provide your feedback and basically stay involved with GeeksRock in a continued manner. So hopefully, what we want to see is not just today's event being memorable and hearing interesting stories, but we also want each one of you to be part of GeeksRock so that we can continue this event and have more of these events in the future. We have some interesting ideas which we have bounced, maybe the next event could be some of the alumni sharing their travel stories, like a 5-minute travel story, some interesting place they went, something about travel, something about their business, and anything that they could share on that. Or it could be anybody on the science, on the business side, or on the tech side, sharing some of the game-changing ideas that are coming just a 5-minute pitch on what's new, what's hot. So those are the type of things which we are thinking. Hopefully this will become a new platform. Hopefully you will kind of come on board with us that this is a different type of event. It's unlike others where you hear a monologue or sometimes you see a kind of a promotional pitch, but this one will be truly about sharing experiences. So that was a kind of a brief background about GeeksRock. I'll move away from the podium to let the speakers come in and share their stories. So the very first one is Ann Costlow. I hesitate to even say anything about her because I'm sure anybody and everybody knows about her or has eaten or been to her franchise, Sofi Crepes. She has a very interesting story. She was a stockbroker, and then one day she decided she didn't want to do that anymore, and she created this fantastic chain. I eat at Sofi's twice a week and a big fan of it. So I'm thankful to her for bringing this amazing restaurant chain to the Baltimore City, and looking forward to hear Ann's story. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ann Costlow, and I am the founder of Sofi's Crepes. And I'm here to talk to you, and I'm also a corporate dropout. But I wanted to talk to you about, I don't know, what do you think an entrepreneur is? I mean, I think we all have preconceived ideas. It's Steve Jobs, it's Bill Gates, it's, Michael Bloomberg. Webster's says that it's a person who starts a business and is willing to risk loss in order to make money. And then a Harvard Business School professor, Howard Stevens, says, entrepreneurs see opportunity and don't feel constrained from pursuing it because of lack of resources. They're used to making things happen without resources. And I think that's really kind of a description of the way that I started my business. As I said, I was a stockbroker for 16 years, and I worked for some of the major firms, Alex Brown, which is no longer around, T. Rowe Price, Merrill Lynch. Actually, none of them are, some of them are around, but I was feeling very stuck in my position. I had been doing it for quite some time, and I had the proverbial golden handcuffs where they basically say, if you stay with the company for 10 years, you can achieve this amount of money. And if you stay for, whatever. So I really felt like I didn't have a choice, that I really couldn't walk away from this. But I knew in my heart that I was not happy doing what I was doing. And I was thinking about it for quite some time. Until one day, when I turned around, I worked right over at the harbor. You could probably see the building from here. And I was looking out my window from the 22nd floor, and I had a pair of binoculars that I had gotten as a gift, and I was just staring out there. And it was when it was the parade of sails, and there were many, many tall ships that were coming into town. And I saw the Pride of Baltimore. And the Pride of Baltimore I had known of since I moved to Baltimore, and I had dreams of working on that when I was like 20 years old. And that just sort of, came and went. And so this one day I just thought, I would rather be on that boat than up here, so much in my heart, and I am just gonna, so literally what I did was I went downstairs, I went down to the boat, I took the crew only sign and walked right on the boat and asked for the captain, and the captain said, yes, can I help you? I said, well, see that building over there? He said, yes. I said, well, I work there, and I could probably take a leave of absence, and I could probably come and cook on your ship or be a crew member or something like that. And he said, well, have you ever cooked before? I said, well, no. And he said, well, have you ever sailed before? I said, well, no. Well, a week later, I was the cook on the Pride of Baltimore. I actually was able to talk to my manager at my job and say, I took the binoculars into his office, and I said, do you see that boat down there? And he said, yes. And I said, I have the opportunity to work on that. And so the bottom line of that is ask, and sometimes you will receive. So anyway, I went off. I met the boat in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, And we started sailing. We went across the Atlantic to Nova Scotia, up into Canada, into the Great Lakes. And I spent about 3 months on that boat, working harder than I had ever worked in my life, making meals for 16 crew members, and really that were on 2 ships, so it was really 8 meals a day. It was a lot of work, and it gave me a lot of time to think and a lot of time to reflect on my life. And when I came back, I actually went back to that same job, but I knew that my days were numbered. There was no way that I could stay doing that. So I used my Hopkins resources, and I actually met with the career counseling group, and I basically said, I can't stand doing this. And it was the first time that what I felt was someone that I really respected said, if you don't like doing it, then quit. It doesn't matter. You need to do what you want. And so that really gave me the courage to take the first steps that I needed. And I didn't know really where I was going to go, but I knew that I had to get out. So I took a short-term step, and I quit my job to go work on a political campaign for 6 months, because I knew that it was my way out without just telling my clients, well, I've been with you for 16 years. I don't know what I'm going to do when I'm quitting. So I thought that was a more respectable way to do it, which I did. And 6 months after that, I was unemployed. And I thought, well, gosh, what am I going to do now? Well, I had spent a lot of time in France, and I knew that crepes were a big thing over there. And I thought, well, heck, why don't we have them here? So that was it. Once I had the idea, I started to run with it. I went back to France. I went to Brittany. I would go to the restaurants. I would take pictures. I would ask the owners if I could take their menus. I went to Le Cordon Bleu and signed up for a 2-day baking class so I could be accredited from Le Cordon Bleu. And when I came home, I looked for a spot and found 150 square feet next to a restaurant, or next to the Charles Theater. And it took a year for that 150 square feet to be developed. But finally, 10 years ago, the doors opened at Sofi's Crepes. And it's been an amazing experience since then. I have 2 shops myself. We have 4 franchises that have been open from either past employees or customers. And we're registered in 20 states. And actually looking to possibly expand to some new regions. So it's pretty exciting. But am I done? That's part of being an entrepreneur. You really never stop thinking about what's next. It's been 10 years, and somehow I think that Baltimore needs some inner city miniature golf courses. So stay tuned. You never know what the next meeting may bring. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Anne. That was an amazing story. Thanks for sharing with us. Next is Sarah Hemminger. She has done what's one of the most impossible tasks in the community, is mentoring high school teenagers. So any one of you has done that knows how tough and how difficult it is. And Sarah has done that at a community level. She created this a nonprofit called Incentive Mentoring Program, which has successfully mentored hundreds of high school teenagers, which is an amazing achievement. She has won several national and regional awards for her effort. And we again happy and excited to have her here to learn about her story.
Hi. So my story as an entrepreneur started almost 20 years ago now, when I was a freshman in high school back in Indiana. I went in for my first day of school, sat down in my chair, and looked towards the front of the room, and there was a guy sitting in the teacher's seat. And of course I decided to say, well, what are you doing sitting in the teacher's seat? You're not supposed to be sitting there. And he said, I can sit anywhere I want. I'm a senior, and I'm overseeing the class today. And I said, you're not a senior, it's a freshman homeroom. And anyway, we went back and forth, and had a ridiculous argument about where he was allowed to sit, and over time became very good friends. And as we became friends, people would say things to me about him. So you know how high school can be, there's a lot of rumors. People would say his mom's a drug addict, his dad's in prison. These weren't your normal, who made out with who on a Friday night sort of rumors. But when you're a freshman and he's a senior and you have a little bit of a crush, you don't want to walk up to someone and say, what's going on with that? And so it took months and months before he actually explained his story to me. And what had happened was that years earlier, when he was in junior high, his mom was in a really bad accident. She was temporarily paralyzed, couldn't work. She ended up losing her job. They ended up losing their home. They moved from suburbia to public housing. She became very depressed and addicted to the painkiller that she had been prescribed from her accident. Things then spiraled out of control to where she was using heavily and then began selling drugs in order to support her own habit. And so he essentially went from the equivalent of cornfields to crack house in about 9 months. And as a result, he stopped attending school his freshman year of high school. He failed almost all of his classes, and he was going to drop out. But there was this, so I'm trying to understand, okay, how in the world, you got to kind of put it into perspective. He was a senior when I met him. He was getting ready to go to the Naval Academy. He was a straight A student. He was a varsity athlete. So my little 14-year-old brain is trying to comprehend, how did you go from straight Fs to straight As, and how did you go from almost dropping out to the Naval Academy? And he explained it was two things. One, he had to just make better decisions. He had to decide, even if he hadn't eaten or bathed or slept, to get up and go to school to do his homework. Very basic things. But equally as important to him making better decisions were that there was this incredible group of teachers who made it easier for him to make those decisions. So it's a lot easier to get up and go to school when someone brings you breakfast or brings you clean clothing or provides a ride. And so what they did was they really wrapped their arms around him and became his extended family when his family was in crisis. And it fundamentally changed his life. And at the time, I think I didn't really understand the impact of the teachers, but I understood that anyone who could live in the situation that he had lived in and make so much of their life in such a small amount of time was someone that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And so we started dating, fell in love, and 5 years later got married. But that's part one of my story as an entrepreneur. Part two is that that wasn't actually what caused IMP to get started. What caused IMP to get started was I came out to Hopkins as an undergrad, and I had this master checklist of all the things I thought I needed to do with my life to be happy. So the degree I was going to get, the job I was going to get, the sorority I was going to join, the house I wanted to buy, the Kate Spade bag that I thought was fantastic. And what I did was, for 4 years, I just systematically checked everything off my list. And I came back to do a PhD, and I found myself with my list fully checked off, and I was like the most miserable person on the planet. And again, it's one of those things, you just sound like a spoiled brat if you say, I'm so unhappy. Unhappy about what? You've got the degree you wanted, you bought the house, you married. What is it you're unhappy about? And it wasn't until I was driving, I used to come in and drive on Orleans every day to class in graduate school, and I was literally stopped at the light at Caroline in Orleans, and it was like someone removed the blinders for the first time. And even though I had driven that exact same way every single day, I had never even noticed that there was a high school. And as soon as I realized there was a high school, I looked to the other side of the street and I realized that that was public housing. And it wasn't a whole lot of time then before I looked straight ahead and I saw the Hopkins building. And the thought that crossed my mind wasn't, the disparity between the two. The thought that really, honestly, in that moment changed the rest of my life was that I thought, I bet there's kids in that high school that are very much like my husband, who are really smart, really talented, are very distracted by things outside of school. And what I thought was that I actually felt more comfortable that I could form relationships with them than I could my own peers at Hopkins. And that was really the thing that changed it all for me, because I realized that the reason I was miserable was that I felt alone. And so I didn't have family in Baltimore. I wasn't part of a community. And so when we think about what is poverty in IMP, we define poverty not as financial poverty, but as being alone. And that's something that no matter what your background is or how you grew up, we all can relate to. You can be in a room with 800 people and feel completely and utterly alone. And so what that prompted was really building a culture within the organization of everyone has something to teach and everyone has something to learn. And the way that we live that out is that we enroll students that are exactly like my husband. So during their freshman year of high school, they're failing all of their classes. They are facing enormous challenges outside of the classroom. To give you a sense, the average GPA of our most recent cohort of students was a 58% out of 100. And then once they're enrolled, it's forever. So we don't work with who shows up, we work with who we've become family. So once they're in IMP, it's permanent, and the program lasts 10 years. So it's the rest of high school and 6 years after high school. And during that time, each student is given exactly what Ryan had. So it's a group of anywhere from 3 to 8 adults, and those adults do everything from pack lunches, give rides to school, tutor, drive a kid to college, help them find a summer job. Essentially, whatever you would do for your own child is what we do for our children. And what comes of that, though, is this really unique set of relationships that's not just with the student, where we're all learning from our experiences with them, but it's also with one another, right? So if you go to pick a kid up for school and the first time you try, he cusses you out and says, "Get out of my house," there's a shared experience there that really has brought all of us together, and that shared experience, it's woven in many different directions. So that's kind of the core of what we do. And then what has happened from there is that we have also engaged collaborators. So a lot of times what you'll find is that early on in the organization, we would have multiple people running into each other down at legal aid. So say there were multiple kids facing eviction, you would end up having multiple volunteers trying to solve the same problem. We realized that was inefficient. So we also have 14 different programs and services that connect our students and our volunteers and our organization to pro bono services and expertise in the community. So you would have a legal partner who provides representation pro bono for our students in that case. And so what's happened is over the last 10 years, we've not only built this really beautifully integrated community that transcends racial, socioeconomic barriers that are really deep-rooted, especially in the city of Baltimore, but it's led to extraordinary student success. So in 10 years, we have never lost a single kid from our program. Every single student that's ever started has stayed in the program. 100% of them, even though they started as the most underperforming in their class, have graduated from high school. 96% have been accepted to college. And then the oldest cohort, who are now 10 years out, so they just finished, our alumni, 80% of them have a 4 or 2 year college degree or certificate. So the impact has been really profound, both on my life in that I think I read one time that the key to happiness is finding the intersection of these 3 things. It's what you're great at, what you're passionate about, and what the world needs. And I feel like this, for me, has become the intersection of those 3 things and has fundamentally changed the course of my entire life. And then similarly, I think the same could be said for all of our students and the volunteers that have participated in the program. The last quick thing I'll say about entrepreneurship is I think key to evolving the model of our organization. So we currently have 160 students and over 700 volunteers and over 70 collaborators. What has been key is going from just my husband and I and 15 kids to actually what is a rather large organization has been building a culture of entrepreneurship. So really building a culture where even amongst, a group of say 1,000 people, and any individual feels empowered to say, this isn't working, or this could be done better, or what, I have this idea, do you think we could try to see if we can do something with it? That has been the key to evolving all of the different aspects of our organization and creating that culture where people question everything. And I think that's something I pulled from science, but I think is really important in actually continuing to evolve and grow over time. So I think those 2 things are intricately tied and both very critical. And I think that process of working together entrepreneurially has also been part of the transformative experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. That was an amazing story. Next, we have Melissa, Fensterstock, and Michael. They're a young couple, recently graduated from Hopkins, and they have an amazing story of a new company that they recently created called Aromaflage, for which they won some national business competition awards. And we're again grateful to them. They traveled all the way from New York to come here and to share their stories with us. Thank you.
It's really wonderful to be back at both of our alma maters. This is Melissa Fensterstock, my wife. I'm Michael Fensterstock, recent graduate from the Carey Business School. Melissa went here undergrad. Over the next 10 minutes, we just want to tell you a little bit about our journey of creating a company and a brand, Aromaflage, together, which is about 1.5 years old. We're both idea people. We're really inspired by innovation, by new things, by energy. And what really sort of excels me to do things and excites me is innovative ideas. What we think that we're doing is exceptionally different, but it's really all about the execution. I was in a corporate job for about 10 years in marketing for law firms and for a financial institution, and all of a sudden I had a physical mishap happen. I actually had an aneurysm in my heart while I was working out. So some really phenomenal things happened as a result of my surgery. It really was the Kickstarter to having us form this business together.
So as like everybody in this room, we're inspired by different things. We are very much inspired by our travels, and we're on our honeymoon, 9 months after Michael had this really traumatizing experience. And we were in Southeast Asia and came across this unmarked bottle that they said they use locally as bug spray. And I happened to get eaten alive by mosquitoes, and so we were really excited that we found this magic potion, you could say, and so we didn't have to use off, and we didn't have to use harsh chemicals, and we used the product for the entire time we were there, and we're just so floored by it because it smelled so great and it worked so well, and we said, how could something like this exist and not be at home? So we had both been looking for something to do that we were both really passionate and excited about, that could get us up out of bed every day. And we came back to the United States and said we wanted to do something new and innovative, and we wanted to create a new category. So what we wanted to do was create this new category that, in the beauty space, we're calling fragrance with a function. So a perfume that has a purpose, essentially. So we wanted to just try and create this new category. So I thought that Michael and I, over the next few minutes, would just talk about some of the challenges and opportunities in trying to create a brand and create a luxury brand, something that neither of us has done before. We're learning as we go, and our brand is evolving. But there are a few points that I thought would be maybe helpful to just talk through. So for us, there have been a few pillars that have been really important in trying to create a luxury brand. The first is very much the go-to-market strategy. So you have this new concept, and how do you execute on it, and how do you create something that people want and something that there's demand for? So for us, the first piece that was really important was launching the product in the right places. So we had this really awesome product that we felt really strongly about, but we needed to get it out there. So the first step was launching last summer in markets like Nantucket, Hamptons, Martha's Vineyard, Palm Beach, places where people maybe would appreciate something like this and wanted to test the market and see if it would work there. So that was step one, and associating ourselves with really high-end resorts and channels. So for example, we're at Canyon Ranch, we're at Four Seasons, Rosewood Hotels, Brilliant Chateau, so trying to create a high-end brand by associating ourselves with other high-end locations. So that was really step one in really trying to get the brand out there and controlling where it is, how people are interacting with it. The next, I would say, is also packaging and the language.
Packaging was quite the journey for us. We sampled glass from all over the world, from Latin America, from China, from Europe and ultimately settled on Parisian glass, which we felt was the most quality. People say that packaging is really what sells a product, because when you go to a store, the thing you see is the packaging. It talks to you. So we took a lot of time to iterate on the gold foil stamp and the design. Every word on this package was carefully selected, and our story was carefully crafted so that there's not too much on there, but it's actually really informative. It shows you how to use the product, talks to what's in the product. And I'll pass this around a little later so you can actually experience it. And then we decided, since we were going to launch a prestige brand, we needed packaging that was different. Rather than just have a cardboard insert, let's have this functional baggie so you can throw it in your bag, so it's actually on the go, it's purposeful, it's not wasteful for the environment. And subsequent to that, we said, okay, we have this great package. How are we going to get it out there? Why is packaging so important? Well, we need samples. Samples are really critical to people experiencing the product. So that's a whole other step of packaging, where you have to come out with samples, and then you have to distribute the samples. I'm going to let Melissa talk a little bit about our distribution of the samples and the options for giving them out at charities and different types of opportunities there.
Right, so once you have your product, then you also need to sell through different channels, so whether that's your e-commerce website or through these high-end retailers. And that's something we're testing and iterating as we speak. You know, what percentage of our business do we want to be online versus what percentage we use brick and mortar? And we've seen a lot of businesses come out that have just done e-commerce, but you know what? Now they're also starting to open retail stores, and you see vice versa. So clearly it's some kind of blend, and we don't know where we're going to end up in that hybrid, but we know that it'll involve both, of course. And then in terms of the samples that Michael was talking about, there are a few different ways of sampling, and a lot of them are very different. So one is, I'm sure you've all been to many events where you get a little swag bag, so we've participated in those types of bags. Then there's, just handing them out. Michael and I, that's a way we get our brand out there, is we carry these with us, and when we talk to someone and they're interested, we hand it out, and there's nobody that's a better ambassador for your product than yourself. So that's one strategy. And then the third way that we actually have had a lot of traction is in these box programs. So for example, many of you may know Birchbox. There's a host of other box programs, which has just been really great to get the brand out there, where now 50,000 people, we haven't participated yet in that program, but we've done other types of boxes where you have many thousands of people that it's very targeted and they're experiencing your product. So that's been a great way to test distribution strategies and marketing. The final pillar, I guess I would say, that has been really important and critical in building the brand is building brand trust. And a function of that has actually been through PR. And PR, you can pay a lot of money for PR firms, and I'm sure that at some point that's something we will invest in. But right now, Michael and I have been doing our own PR. But it's been really phenomenal, because if you have a product, you do need to get it out there, but you also need third-party people to validate and vouch for your brand. And it's amazing how much traction you can get with that. So we've been really fortunate. We've had some phenomenal press, and it's just been really great in helping bring credibility to the brand. And also, a lot of people have purchased from our website that hadn't tried our product. And with something like this, you would think you would probably want to smell it before purchasing it. But because these third-party PR these third-party articles have come out in support of the brand, a lot of people are willing to try something without actually having experienced it themselves. So that's been a really valuable lesson for us, that PR is incredible. But another learning from PR is that it's actually very spiky. So just because you get a spike in demand doesn't mean that you can sustain that demand. And that's something that in an inventory-heavy business you just need to be aware of, that just because people are coming today doesn't mean they're going to come in 6 months from now. So that's something that Michael and I are learning to do to try and, build repeat business, and also just be better business forecasters, I guess you could say. Is there anything else you want to add there?
So part of our supply chain, we do believe in doing well by doing good, just like the Carey Business School motto. And in fact, we actually, since we discovered the fragrance in Southeast Asia, it's handcrafted by Burmese refugee women. So we actually have this social impact embedded in our supply chain. It says a little bit on the box, it says the sale of this product supports the developing world. We don't exploit that at all. It's actually really important to us to help this program develop and to help legalize these women and give them a safe working environment, which lends credibility and also helps people write articles, because when they have a really cool story, which is actually authentic, it's based on a real trip, a real problem. Everyone hates bug spray. Everyone hates these chemicals that they have to put on themselves, that they have to wash off before they go to bed. So we actually have a natural solution to that problem that, oh, by the way, has a really powerful social impact to it. So the story really does make a lot of sense when you put all the pieces together. It's just executing. And then, as Melissa just alluded to, the inventory is sort of something that we're constantly dealing with. Lean supply and operations is a huge challenge, and we could have a weekend where 1,000 orders go through, and then all of a sudden, wow, we need to order 50,000 units to prepare, but we don't get pressed for 3 months, so we make no sales. That's just a pretty stark example, but these things do happen in reality, and when you're sourcing all these different components from all over the world, you just have to be really careful and cognizant over your supply chain.
Guess that's it.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to Melissa and Michael for sharing this story. I think it's a great case study for all of us. Next is Professor Frederic Abramson. He has an interesting background which combines training in a lot of different areas, mathematics, biology, law, policy, patents. It's a long list. One of the key things I wanted to mention about Dr. Abramson is my exposure with him was when I took his classes 15 years ago. Growing up, I'd heard of this Socratic style of teaching, where you sit in a room and the teacher throws a question, and then you basically go around chasing and try to find the answer. And for the first time in my life, I was exposed to that style of teaching, which only Dr. Abramson seems to use. And it's an amazing way of teaching, which has stayed with me for years. Anything I learn in his class, I use it every day. I think Dr. Abramson has an interesting background in terms of his training, and also he has been behind several nonprofits and ventures that he has started. So we're looking forward to hear some interesting lessons to learn from him. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, what an astonishing introduction. I tell people that I spoil an evening for consenting adults. Then people think I'm in a different business. Okay, so I thought about this for the last few days, what to share with you people tonight. And let me begin with a conversation I had last Thursday. I had lunch with Jerry Carmen, who was Ronald Reagan's campaign manager in 1980 in New Hampshire. And he asked me a question. He said, did you think you were poor when you were growing up? And I said, yeah, I was poor when I was growing up. He said, no, I didn't ask you that. Did you think you were poor when you were growing up? I said, no. Well, we'll come back to that in a little bit. I discovered that my passion really takes two tracks. One is I love solving problems. And the bigger the problem, the more interesting it is. The second thing is I love learning and I love experiencing things. And I think that those two things explain a life path that makes no sense. So my first job was in the rock and roll field, working on the business side, promoting record hops and rock and roll shows, and working in A&R. So my joke is I knew Sam Cooke when he was alive. I then worked in retail, and at the age of 18, I became a manager of 2 departments in a department store, which if you think about is astonishing because you can't send an 18-year-old to McDonald's and hope they get the thing right. I then went into retail in electronics. I was in manufacturing. I started a company there, and I'll share some issues there. I did consulting. I was an auto mechanic. I taught in a medical school. I did policy work for Joe Califano at HEW, was with General Electric. This is my 49th year in the computer field. I started out in computer programming in 1965. I became a lawyer. I've been teaching in various schools, including Johns Hopkins, University of Kentucky, Georgetown, other places. So all of this tied together. So how do you make sense of this? Oh, and learning, by the way, I loved your story because when I was in high school, they told me I would never go to college because I was a terrible student. I have a triple F in Spanish from a teacher who was retiring. She said I was the worst student she ever had. But I applied to the University of Pennsylvania. I went to school in Philadelphia, and I got in. And I continued my stellar career by being on probation for 7 semesters. and graduating with the lowest GPA in history of the school, 1.65. But I'm a little crazy because I applied to graduate school, mainly because I didn't want to go to Vietnam. And I applied to 4 schools, Penn State, Maryland, Stanford, and Rochester. Guess which 2 took me? Stanford and Rochester. Now, you have to explain, how does the world work that someone with this stellar record gets into a school like Stanford and Penn State and Maryland turned me down within 4 microseconds of my application hitting the table? And it has to do with a sense that I do like solving problems. So I want to share 3 success disappointment stories. And to me, by the way, success and disappointment are outcomes. They really are irrelevant to the thing. They're simply the score at the end of the game. I like playing the game. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. But you got to play. And part of playing the game is how do you improve the next time you play. That's how you build championship mentality. If you play the same way, you will ultimately lose all the time. So 3 stories. One was in 1973, I was asked to solve a problem in hospitals of how do you address the question of people getting infected in the hospital. You go in the hospital and you get sick in the hospital with a bacterial infection or viral infection, and sometimes you die, which is not exactly the outcome you want. So I took this on. I knew how to do computers and statistics, and I figured I solved the problem. I worked out a method to actually pinpoint how your risk of infection going into a hospital, given who your surgeon was, the procedure, where you were in the hospital, all these things. Really cool. And we actually lowered the hospital infection rate in some hospitals in Miami and Tampa. So I said, this is really cool. I'm going to go sell it. Hey, what a great idea. So I would go to hospital administrators and say, I have a method to lower your infection rate. And they said, well, we can't buy it. So well, why not? They said, well, first of all, if you cut our infection rate in half, all the lawyers will sue us because they'll say that should have been the rate, and we can't win. And second of all, when someone gets sick, that's our most profitable stay. So it's good for us when people get sick in the hospital. And I said, this is nuts. I mean, we're in the healthcare system, and they're telling me why it's profitable to let people get sick. I said, see ya, I'm out of the game. I don't play with stupid people. That's how it's going to go. So I got into manufacturing. I used to own a 240Z. Anybody know what that car is? One of the first inexpensive sports cars. Silver, black interior. I was in Kentucky. You ever get in a car in August in a black interior, silver car? It's like it takes 5 minutes for your skin to recover. So I said, I know how to do this. I'm going to cover the seat with sheepskin because sheepskin has this great heat-absorbent stuff. And it worked. So I said, hell, why don't we design seat covers for sports cars? Because I'm not the only person who hates getting in a car. So we designed these really great slip-over cars for sports cars with seats. We had this phenomenal ad to go 4-color, full-page ad for Playboy Penthouse. Dawn, a Glade, a Porsche is pulling out of the Glade. On one side are tuxedo, men's evening clothes. On the other side are women's evening clothes, and the caption reads, "It feels so good you want to drive naked." I loved it. But guess what? I couldn't persuade any investors to put money into this. They said, well, this is a stupid idea. You have to have women sewing, and they're going to be sewing in Kentucky, and you should be sewing in Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic or China, where the hell it is. It's too expensive and labor intensive. We're not going to invest. Disappointment. Okay, life goes on. At that point, I had a chance to go to another school, which was MIT. I'm a Sloan Fellow, so I got another educational high point. I also have a PhD from the University of Michigan, so some of my schools play football, others don't, but it doesn't matter. It works out. But let me come to the third story. I'm teaching at Hopkins, and we're talking about real life things. Rob knows that. I tend to live in the here and now, not in some abstract world. And what are the problems that we face today as people? What are the things that you have to deal with, we all have to deal with? Well, they're really simple. One of them is, how do I control my weight? This is not a trivial issue for people. How do I raise kids successfully, make them come out right? How do I have a good relationship with other people? My spouse, my significant other, my coworkers? How the hell do I know who I am? And with the help of my students, boom, the light hit me. It's in our genes. Lady Gaga said it, born this way, right? Here we are in the greatest revolution technologically to look inside the human genome, and all we hear about is how we're going to die. I am tired of hearing why Angelina Jolie took her breasts off because she has the BRCA gene. I'm done with that. We have 22,000 genes. Only a few of them kill us. The rest of us define who we are now. And I said, why don't we make that information available to people? Why not let you know how you were born and what your starting point was? Because if you know this, maybe you can make smarter decisions about who you are. Maybe you can figure out things about your children. Suppose you have a child that's born with a gene that you don't learn from negative experience, i.e. you repeat your mistake. Well, what would you do? Well, one guy told me, I'm going down to the school and talk to the teacher. My kid is not stupid. So we tend to we've ignored this reservoir of data. So my passion now is, let's cash in on the data that we're carrying around and let it make a difference in our lives so we know who we are and we know who everyone else is, and we can make better decisions. Not perfect decisions, just better. I put it the equivalent of weather forecasting. You know, you get up in the morning, you watch the weather. They said we're going to have a great weekend this weekend. Low humidity, 80 degrees, great to be outside. If they said it's going to rain on Saturday, does that mean you go into mourning? No. 40% chance of rain means maybe you have an umbrella, maybe you do have the picnic or not. We make decisions all the time with uncertainty. To me, this is the opportunity genetics offers. This is my passion. So I don't have a success or disappointment here because the game isn't over. I'm still playing. But that's really what I wanted to share with you. That ultimately, it doesn't really matter, in my mind, what we end up doing. Just play the game. Do things. You win, celebrate. You lose, celebrate anyway. But figure out why you lost and move on to the next thing. Anyway, that's my story.
Thanks to Dr. Abramson for sharing his stories. Next, last but not least, is Clarence Wooten. He has an amazing story. I mean, he has been a serial entrepreneur for now almost 16 years. He sold his first company in the tech boom of 1998, and that's when he had one of the big successes. And since then, he has been behind several companies, Image Cafe, GroupSite, and currently progressively. He's based out of Palo Alto. We would like to believe that he came just for us, all the way, to talk to us today. So,
Great. Thank you. My name is Clarence Wooten. I'm a Hopkins grad from the Carey School back in the mid-'90s. As you mentioned, I've been a serial entrepreneur my entire career. Oftentimes when you hear about entrepreneurship, you hear about the success stories. What happened after the fact? You know, Twitter, super successful. Facebook, super successful. But along the road of success, there are always pitfalls, struggles, and lots of subplots that we very rarely get an opportunity to really hear about. I think some of us have heard about Twitter, how there was another founder who was literally kicked from the company and didn't receive any stock, et cetera. And everyone else became billionaires later on. But these are the stories that we don't talk about, we don't hear a lot about, and as an entrepreneur, I think it's important to sort of share some of those stories. So I've decided that I'm going to share a story tonight that I've never shared publicly before. So let me take you back. So the year was 1999. I had co-founded an internet startup called imagecafe.com. It was located right here in Columbia, Maryland, actually. I had a partner who had co-founded the company with me a year and a half earlier. But shortly after we co-founded the company, my partner moved to South Florida because we were entrepreneurs. Literally, we had very little resources. he decided he was going to go to South Florida, and he said that, you know, once we raised some money, he would come back and help build the company. So being very hungry and motivated, I really wanted to go out and raise capital. So I'd become a student of the internet. I'd watched Jerry Yang and Follow start Yahoo. I'd watch all these search engines launch, pre-Google, Alta Vista, et cetera. And all of those companies launched by raising angel capital and then venture capital. So I literally went from Silicon Valley to Silicon Alley raising money. And fortunately, I was able to raise about $500,000 in seed capital to sort of get the company off the ground and start really bringing on our early employees. During this process, we were able to sort of bootstrap, build the software for Image Cafe, launch it, and all while that's happening, my partner is still in South Florida. So I'm calling him every week. When are you going to move back up? You got to help me build the company. We've now gotten to the point where venture capitalists are interested. You know, we had 3 VCs, or actually 2 VCs and 1 corporate investor, all lined up to do a $3 million financing round. He would fly into town and help out when he could, but he was really operating on remote control. So that was frustrating to me. So we had this tension going back and forth. And I had sold him and his skill set to the VCs who had never really met him. They heard about him, but they had never really met him. By then we have probably about 12 employees in the company. And moving towards closing this $3 million round, which was supposed to really take the company to that next level. So this is around, I'm going to say, maybe June of 1999. So as a young 20-something internet entrepreneur, I'd heard a lot of horror stories about venture capitalists. I was really terrified of a VC having too much control over the business. So I was trying to put together the perfect round. I wanted to bring in multiple VCs so not one firm had too much control. I'd also been pursuing a corporate partner, a company by the name of Network Solutions, who back then had a monopoly on .com names, to come in as a strategic investor, and was finally able to get all 3 to the table, and they were each going to put $1 million into the company. So I figured we were on our way. This is the capital we needed to convince my partner to move back from South Florida. But he had a girlfriend, and love would do strange things sometimes. And so I was also terrified that because we didn't have a full management team, someone told me that if you didn't have a management team, VCs would put their own managers in place. And so in my concern and haste, I rushed out to hire a senior management team as quick as I possibly could. So the first hire, I'm only going to use fake names. The first hire was I brought him on as VP of Business Development. His name is Dan. So Dan had been with me since about April, maybe March of 1999. And now we're probably around August time frame when I'm telling this story. 2 months later, I brought on a guy named Hans, the COO, and a guy named Jeff, a UPenn grad, and again, we're just using fake names here. Jeff as CFO. And so because there was this tension, I had this new management team. We're headed towards closing the financing. I'm burning through cash because we're not yet profitable. And I'm debating with my partner, trying to get him to move. He still didn't want to move. Meanwhile, I'm frustrated because we both own the same amount of equity. And that can be very, very tough when you have a co-founder and you're doing more of the work at the time, or at least you feel that way. And so he is not really seeing what I'm seeing because he's in South Florida. So at the time, he suggested, why don't you buy me out? You're about to get $3 million, buy me out. Now, that wasn't technically my money, so I couldn't buy him out. But fortunately, I had good attorneys. A year prior to that, I had read a book called Burn Rate, and he talked about a law firm in Silicon Valley called Wilson Sonsini. And he said it was the most powerful law firm in tech. And I did an Alta Vista search, went to their website, went to their attorney directory, sent the same cookie-cutter email to 4 attorneys at the firm. I told them I was the CEO of an East Coast-based e-commerce internet startup, and I was looking for Silicon Valley-based legal representation and venture funding. Give me a call. I'd like to show you what we have. And this is a year prior. We hadn't even launched yet. Left the house, came back. The first message on my machine was from a guy named Mike Arrington, who was a young associate at Wilson Sonsini. And so Mike loved what we were doing. He worked under a partner, a guy by the name of Jim Strawbridge, who was Netscape's attorney. Netscape had just gone public a couple of years prior, which started the whole dot-com boom. And Jim, coincidentally, happened to be from Catonsville, Maryland. And so all those things kind of lined up. They liked the idea, they liked me, and they decided that they would represent us free until we close a significant financing. And so so basically, we have Wilson Sonsini on our behalf. So meanwhile, I'm thinking, when my partner is saying buy me out, I need to come up with some cash to buy my partner out. So I have a new management team. They all had a little bit of equity. They had options, but they all wanted more. And so I approached my management team, and I said, hey, there's probably an opportunity to buy out my partner's equity. Would you guys like to participate? So they got really excited. Then I talked to my attorneys, and the attorneys said, oh, you can buy him out with a promissory note. You don't have to give him any cash. Just give him a promissory note that he'll be paid in the future, assuming something happens. And so ultimately, I took the promissory note route. Now, I didn't buy him completely out because we were longtime friends, and I wanted him to own some equity. I just didn't feel like his equity should be on par with mine. Okay, so to make a long story short, when that happened, there was a lot of contention amongst the management team because they wanted, and I didn't see this contention, but they wanted to, they wanted to find a way to get more equity because they knew that capital was about to come into the company. So one of the members of the management team, Dan, who I had exposed during VC meetings to my VC early on, the lead VC, started talking to that VC, unbeknownst to me, behind my back. And the VC put the brakes on the closing of the financing. So I was coming to a point where I was about to be out of cash, no round was closing, and again, things were starting to get kind of tight. So I got a fax from the VC, and I decided to, so the night before I shared that with my entire management team, what was going on. Got a fax from the VC the next morning. I came into the office earlier than normal that next morning, and oddly enough, the 3 members of my management team was already in the office. They were in the conference room. I thought that was kind of odd. So I took the fax, went into the conference room, laid it on the conference room table, and said, guys, take a look at this. So while they were leaning over, reading the fax, Jeff, my new CFO, left his pad exposed on the table. So I start looking at Jeff's pad, because I'm already feeling a little funny because of the fact that they were there early meeting amongst themselves. And the first bullet point was, get control of company from Clarence. Bullet point number 2, put Clarence in a sales and marketing role. Bullet point number 3, by then, I couldn't see anything. All I saw was those bullet points. And so I immediately stopped him, and I said, forget what's on the table. I want to know about what's on Jeff's pad. They all looked at me like they saw a ghost. Get control of the company from Clarence? Put Clarence into a sales and marketing role? Are you kidding me? Everybody got quiet. So I sit down, take a deep breath, and I start asking. I'm like, Dan, are you with Image Cafe? No, I said, Dan, are you with Clarence Wooten? Dan says, I'm with Image Cafe. I say, Hans, are you with Clarence Wooten? Hans says, I'm with Image Cafe. I say, Jeff he's the guy whose pad was exposed. He can't even speak. Literally, he's turned into a ghost. And I said, you cannot be with Image Cafe if you're not with Clarence Wooten. So immediately I leave the conference room, go back to my desk, collect myself. Coincidentally, my dad calls the same time. And I said, Dad, They're trying to, it's a coup. I said, I gotta go, but it's a coup. And I was the sort of great family hope, I guess, in that way, because even my parents could see the trajectory we were on. And so I called my fiance at the time, who is more of a corporate person. She had spent time in corporate America. I had spent 0 time in corporate America. All I knew was the entrepreneurship route. And she said, this is what you do. Have your assistant draft a letter suspending them all immediately, pending further investigation. So she drafts the letters, take the letters into the conference room, they all leave. Now, meanwhile, I have about 18 employees. I am getting ready to run out of cash. And 18 employees getting ready to run out of cash. I was having issues with my co-founder, which had slowed down the venture funding because it didn't make sense to the VCs why a co-founder wanted to be bought out, just prior to getting ready to raise a $3 million round. Now my entire management team is gone. So in terms of stress level, you don't know stress until you've been through a situation like that. So I realized that if anybody I had to salvage, it was Dan, because Dan had gone to VC meetings with me. But I did not realize that Dan was the guy who was talking to the VC behind my back, orchestrating the whole thing. But I was concerned that if Dan left because he had exposure with the VCs, we would have some issues. The Brown might not close. Now, prior to this, what I didn't mention is that Network Solutions had offered to buy the company probably a month or so before I accepted the term sheet. And I didn't even want to talk about what they would buy it for because I was thinking Yahoo. We're going to be like Yahoo or Amazon or eToys. That $3 million is going to send us where we need to go. Make a long story short, my fiance said, bring them each and individually and ask them these questions. So the first question was, how long have you been working for Image Cafe? And their answers would be something like 45 days. Question number 2, what did you mean by get control of company from Clarence? And I had my assistant there to take notes, and meanwhile, they all got frustrated and quit. So the only guy who didn't quit was Dan, because I had a separate meeting with Dan. To make a long story short, the fact that they quit meant that they all forfeited the equity, because I'd given them all stock options. And if you quit versus being fired, so this is a note. If you ever have equity, it's better to be fired. Don't quit, because then you don't get any equity. And so they all ended up quitting. And after that experience, I said, you know what? This could go either way. Meanwhile, I'm still running out of cash. The round looks like it's not going to close. So what I end up having to do is find some cash quick, because my burn rate at that time was about $45,000 a month, and we probably had about $4,000 in the bank, and payrolls coming due. So one of the earlier VCs that was interested in backing the company, Mid-Atlantic Ventures, but lost because I decided to go with the other two in Network Solutions. I reached back out to them. They basically said, we can't move as fast as you need us to move, but we're going to introduce you to some angels. Those angels came in on a Sunday, wrote me a $300,000 check, which gave me a lifeline. I went back to Network Solutions, and I said, hey, I think I do want to sell you the business. So to make a long story short, 4 months later, sell the business for $23 million. The story's great. But what no one knows is the amount of hell and struggle that I went through just prior to that moment. So most people hear about the end success stories, but very rarely do you hear the intimate, nasty details that can happen when greed and wealth are all present on the table. That's my story.
Pretty good, right? So we would love it if our speakers wouldn't mind coming up and populating the front here. And what we thought we would do is to give you an opportunity to ask some questions. You can ask a question of a specific speaker, or you can ask a question and throw it out to everybody. And if so you have to come. if one person answers the question and you have something you want to add on to it, then we'll go ahead. And I'm going to try, why don't you guys stand more in front or to the side, and I'm going to try to repeat the question, okay? So I know you have to have some questions, okay?
A couple right here. You know, one of my favorite shows on TV is Shark Tank. You guys ever think about kind of going?
So the question was, what about going on Shark Tank from Melissa and Michael?
Great question. We get asked that a lot. We're in the process of applying, actually, so there's a chance you might see us on Shark Tank.
I know one of the producers, so.
Okay, awesome.
There was more than one hand.
For Clarence, I'm dying to know what happened to the partner at
Well, he's like a brother to me and one of my best friends, and I bounce everything I do business-wise off of him. And the reason why our friendship, sort of withheld that is when I offered to buy him out with a promissory note, I didn't buy him completely out. He still owns 17% of the company. He wanted to sell it all to me. I didn't want him to sell it all to me because we had a track record, a history. And yeah, he became a millionaire after he sold the business. And so he was thankful for that because the promissory note was for $250,000 for me to buy him out. So it all worked out. For you guys that don't know Ken is the guy who recruited me to Hopkins. I was a student at Catonsville in Baltimore County. I playing basketball at Catonsville, was a good student. Hopkins had started this accelerated undergraduate business program called the ABP program, and Ken was on campus recruiting. I was like, wait a minute, I can go to Hopkins, I can get the Hopkins name in just 2 years. It makes sense to me, so Ken. So no, I don't owe you $2 million, but anyway. That will do.
In the back. So wait, the question is, have any of our speakers considered being a full-time employee for someone else instead of an entrepreneur?
It's funny.
Right, or both.
It's funny that you asked that question just now because 4 months ago, Google started recruiting me aggressively for a senior product manager role. And my initial response was, I am a capital gains guy, I'm not a W-2 guy. I've never had a job that I didn't create. So I said no, but then they came back. So a lot of my friends said, hey, go to the dark side, learn how to do it at Google, spend a year there, and maybe take one step back and take 10 steps forward. So coincidentally, I did interview at Google just yesterday. Although more than likely, it's going to be very, very tough. I'm expensive to get me to go to work for somebody else.
Melissa, maybe you can.
Yeah,
When I was with GE, I never considered myself to be a permanent, long-time, lifelong GE person. My view was as long as they had me do interesting things, solving interesting problems. So the first thing was for the secretary of HEW defining alcohol policy. Then they had me work on a project for the NSA on satellite surveillance of all long-distance phone calls in the United States. Just so you know, that was in 1979. So, they actually were doing that. And then they had me tasked to NASA on a space lab. And that's where my spirit of, I don't play with stupid people, caught fire, and I ended up leaving GE because I recommended flying a baby bear in space to hibernate because it would boost NASA's budget because everybody wanted to find out if the bear's still sleeping. And NASA said, no, we have to fly flies and fungus because that's what the science is about. But you don't understand about money, not science. So my career in GE ended at that moment in time.
I just like to answer that question because I'm in that position actually. So I think when you're an entrepreneur, there will be a time where it's very clear, I think, when you need to make that switch. And Michael and I work together. Michael's full-time. I have another job, but I do this in my free time. So because we're married, it works. But I say if you have a partner and they're full-time and you're not, I think that can work. I think if you're by yourself and you're trying to start a business, I think yes, there's instances where you can just quit your job and not have a job for 6 months, but I think it makes sense to kind of incubate your idea, get it to a point, and you'll know when that point is, when you can make the jump. But I think you kind of need to, you owe it to yourself to wait until that point when the business is ready, and you'll know when it's ready. That's my advice.
Just one more, I've heard that it's better to work on your business rather than in your business.
We have a question from our online viewers. This comes from Dwayne Whitfield, who will be starting his MBA at the Carey Business School later this year. He's watching from Northern Virginia. And he has a question for Clarence. He says, Clarence, how has the bad partnership experience affected how you choose partners these days?
Yeah, well, first off, I think it's great to have co-founders when you can have solid co-founders, because when you bring on a co-founder, it's more important to understand how you argue, right? How do you guys resolve arguments? I think that's the most important thing to look at. But there are lots of things you can do that I didn't do initially, and that's one of those things are reverse vesting. So if you start a company with somebody else, you both start off as founders with half the pie each, let's just say for round numbers. You still earn that pie over, let's say, a 3-year period. So if either one of you decides to walk away and not be present, they don't get to keep their half the pie, right? They only get to keep the portion that they had sort of accumulated through vesting while they were there. So I recommend that to anybody who's going into business with co-founders. Also, founders don't always have to be equal. You know, anybody who's been married knows that even though you think it's 50-50, it's not really 50-50. So that's another thing. Now, as far as I'm concerned with partners, I'm just a little more careful when it comes to partners, and I have nothing negative to say about my co-founder. We were just young. He was in Florida. The sun was shining. I was still here in Maryland. And, you know, he wasn't as close to it as I was, because I had been out raising the money. I could smell success more than he could, so he wasn't as motivated as I was at that time. But we both continue to be motivated, and he's a lifelong partner as far as I'm concerned.
We have time maybe for one more question? One more question. So, okay, maybe 2. All right, quick.
Phil, when instructor, I think that what you do is really impressive, but I was wondering where you first started, how you kind of got into it, I guess from going to Hopkins and then seeing the high school, and what kind of happened in between that, I guess.
Yeah, so when I started, if you had said 501c3, I didn't even know what that was. So I knew nothing about Baltimore or high school students or entrepreneurship or nonprofits, any of that. I just was so miserable that I was motivated very selfishly. So I just started by calling the high school and asking if I could work with some students. No one really called me back. Over the course of a couple of weeks, I'd call every single day. And eventually I just went and sat in the principal's office and said, I'm not leaving until he meets with me. And when we met, actually, it was interesting. He said, I give you 2 weeks, like you'll last 2 weeks, but go ahead and do it. He's like, lots of Hopkins students walk across the street and want to do something. So I tease him now that 10 years later, I'm still in it. But, you know, I just had an inclination and just, I don't know, I think being scrappy and kind of just following your gut is really, really important. And that same sort of just go after, that's been repeated throughout the last 10 years in a lot of different situations. But I had no idea what I was doing.
Gus, do we have time for one more? One more? For time? Okay, so one more.
How do you guys juggle family and entrepreneurship?
Well, I'm divorced now, but no, actually, yeah. I mean, that's always a challenge. You just have to have your priorities. I think it's important to stay balanced. And like he said, success is an outcome. Lots of things are outcome, but it's really about the journey and being present. So whether you're being present with your business, when you're in your business, being present with your kids, when you're with your kids, it's important to remember those things because, you know, it's all about the journey.
Sarah.
What about Sarah and?
Sarah.
So one thing I guess I'll say with that, I'll give you a quick story. One of the kids, Albert, who's like my soulmate, who I just remember sitting on a Friday night. This is actually to your question about doing two things at once. So for 6 years I was a volunteer and going to graduate school. So I was hitting 90, 100 hours, sleeping on the couch in my lab, not going home 5 nights a week. And Albert looked at me one night and said, "What the hell's wrong with you? You're the worst wife ever. Go home." And I was like, okay, that's probably true. And I think what has kind of worked over the last, it'll be 15 years in July, is taking turns. So there's been some times in the last 15 years where I get to be really selfish and focus on my baby, and there's been other times where I had to learn then to just let my husband be really selfish and focus on whatever his baby is at the time. And so I just kind of learned, at least for me personally, that the balance doesn't need to come all today. Sometimes it's a balance over many years, and understanding that it's like a long game that's being played, not today. So today, you know, I might have to bend a lot, but tomorrow, you know, he's bending a lot. It's gotten complicated. I had a baby 5 weeks ago, so now for first kid. So I don't know how that will work out. I'm sure that'll change.
I would just add to that, one of the things you can do is you can let everyone know that you think life interferes with life. So I have people asking me things. I have a deadline for, say, Wednesday. And then Tuesday I get a call that my mother's going to be discharged from a rehab facility. So I call and say, forget, you won't see the thing Wednesday. This is my priority. I'm going to do that. Now, if they get weird about it, they've told me something about themselves that says we're going to have a very short relationship. The same is with the family. Sometimes you say to them, I have 5 kids. You say, okay, I have to do this, and here's why. And they say, okay, I understand. So you can negotiate your circumstance with everyone in your environment. And those that understand, I think, understand. And those that don't, you just say goodbye.
For me, I would say that the best part of being an entrepreneur is being able to work when you want to work. It doesn't always work that way, but a lot of times at 11 o'clock at night till 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm on the computer, and you know, my significant other is retired for the evening, but I'm still awake. But then the next morning we can go out for breakfast, or we can go catch a movie at 1 o'clock. So that, to me, is the trade-off. Entrepreneurship offers a lot of flexibility in your life, and that's a real gift.
What about the married couple?
I mean, our best time together is really like Saturday and Sunday mornings when we wake up really early and go for a run. And we're talking about business the entire time, but we're doing something that we both really love to do. Yeah, dinners are awesome, but you know, getting out there and doing something physical that you both really enjoy, and even throwing business into that is okay because you're doing something fun also. You're not necessarily making invoices and calling customers and doing all the other stuff. So finding things that you have in common makes it much easier. We don't have a child yet. I'm sure that's going to make things a little bit more complicated, but we'll cope when we're lucky enough to have that.
So I want to thank everybody, all of our panelists, all our speakers, for being here tonight and sharing their stories and taking questions. And I think they are owed a hearty round of applause. So this actually concludes our evening, the formal part of it anyway. We will retire in a moment to the lobby where people can interact with our speakers and pass cards and talk to each other and ask more questions. I wanted to just say a little bit about our program. So our Affinity Engagement Program is almost 3 years old now. It is about building community at Hopkins widely. And it's about bringing individuals who are part of this community together around shared interests, backgrounds, or passions, or all of the above combined, for networking, personal and professional development and education, and exploration. And so GeeksRock just launched tonight, which is awesome. I want to also thank Rob for his part in all of this, there would not have been an event without him. But we also want to grow and develop, and so we would very much appreciate it if you would be willing to give us your feedback, if you have ideas about new topics, other themes that we can explore, if you know great speakers. We will be sending a follow-up survey. We would be really thrilled if you would take the 2 or 3 minutes that it takes. It's a 5-question survey, it's really quick. And let us know what you think, and if you're interested in being involved in this group or any of the other 21 groups that we now have, we've gone from 3 to 21 in 3 years, we welcome your participation on whatever level. It's a really low threshold of entry. You can talk to Rob about that, he'll tell you. And it's really just interesting and a lot of fun. There are a lot of amazing people here at Hopkins. There are all kinds of great ideas, and the ability to come together and share that across all the divisions and with parents and with students is really has been a wonderful experience. So I want to thank all of you here in the room again for being here, our speakers, Rob, and our online audience as well. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope that you had a wonderful time.
So thank you, you're a great way, quick run out, get something good and nutritious and whatever.
I know, I love that.
Well, good job, Rob. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Same here.
Like, it's 5 years.